All right, let's jump right in.
Sounds good to me.
So today we're diving deep all the way to Brazil,
Yep.
specifically to a municipality called Melgaço.
Melgaço. Have you heard of it?
I can't say I have.
It's part of this massive archipelago,
Oh, wow.
the Marajo archipelago, right on the Amazon River.
That's fascinating.
But here's the thing. Melgaço holds this, well, kind of unfortunate distinction.
What's that?
It has the lowest Human Development Index, or HDI, score in all of Brazil.
Wow, the lowest?
Yeah, so like if you think of HDI as a measure of well-being.
Right, like a report card for a country.
Exactly.
Okay.
It takes into account things like education, healthcare, income, all the essentials.
Makes sense.
And Melgaço sits at a stark 0.418.
Oh, wow, that is low.
We've got this super in-depth article that really digs into life in Melgaço.
Okay.
It also compares it to, get this, São Caetano do Sul,
Okay.
which happens to have Brazil's highest HDI score.
So like two opposite ends of the spectrum.
Exactly, like a tale of two cities, but Brazilian style. I'm intrigued. What's the story in Melgaço, then?
All right, picture this. A place where the Amazon rainforest isn't just something you see on TV.
Right.
It's your backyard, your supermarket, your everything.
Wow.
Forget cars and buses. People get around mainly by boat.
On the rivers.
Yeah, the rivers are like the main highways there.
So even just getting to school or a doctor is a whole journey.
Oh, absolutely. That's where the unique challenges come in.
Makes sense when your whole life revolves around the river.
The article introduces us to Maria Benedita. She's a mother of 14.
14 kids.
Yep, 14 kids. And she paints this vivid picture of life in Melgaço.
Like what?
She talks about this amazing self-sufficiency, like living off the land, using what the rainforest provides.
So like true connection to nature.
Totally, like something many of us have lost touch with.
Right, I get that.
But here's the flip side. There's a lack of dependable, basic public services.
Oh, I see.
It's this interesting contrast, Benedita's resourcefulness and this lack of, modern amenities,
Yeah, I see what you mean.
like with education.
Yeah, how does that work with the whole river situation?
Well, Benedita's kids often miss school simply because the school boat doesn't show up.
The school boat.
Yeah, it's the only way for them to get there.
Wow, so your access to education is literally floating on a boat.
And that's not all. Think inconsistent schedules. Sometimes the meals aren't enough. And the dropout rates, especially for older kids, are pretty high.
It's like one hurdle after another.
The article even mentions this former boatman. He used to see kids arriving at school hungry, sometimes just juice and biscuits for breakfast.
Oh, that's tough.
It really shows how, even with good intentions, geography can be a huge barrier.
Makes sense when something as basic as transportation becomes an obstacle.
And it's not just the kids. Benedita herself is illiterate, which really highlights how these things, compound over time.
Yeah, the cycle of poverty and limited opportunities.
Right. It's a lot to unpack.
But there are some programs in place, right? Like Bolsa Familia.
That's right. Bolsa Familia is this government program that helps low-income families.
How so?
They give financial aid, but on the condition that kids go to school and have regular health checkups.
So it incentivizes families to prioritize those things.
Exactly. It's a good step, but it also underscores how tough things are for many families there.
Makes sense. And what about healthcare? How does that work when you're so reliant on the river?
That's another area where it gets really complicated. The article doesn't paint a pretty picture.
Like what?
Imagine needing medical help, but the only way to get to a doctor is by boat, a journey that could take hours.
Oh, wow. That's a long time, especially in an emergency.
And resources are already stretched thin in the town center.
It doesn't sound good.
Benedita's own story really drives this point home.
What happened?
She lost her husband a few years ago, and the river ambulance, yeah, you heard that right, river ambulance, arrived too late.
Oh, no.
And it's not an isolated incident. There's another story about a child in a nearby community who died, and they never even figured out why.
That's heartbreaking.
It really brings that HDI score, that 0.418, into sharp focus.
Yeah, suddenly it's not just a number. It's real people's lives.
And the stark difference between that and São Caetano do Sul's 0.862 is just, well, it's a lot to think about.
Definitely. So what are some of the key differences that contribute to those scores?
Well, for starters, in Melgaço, people spend, on average, a bit over 5 years in school.
Okay.
While in São Caetano do Sul, it's over 11
Double.
in life expectancy. About 7 years shorter in Melgaço.
Wow, those are significant gaps.
And it's not just those things. Basic infrastructure is also really lacking.
Like what?
Melgaço has zero connection to a treated sewage system.
Zero.
Zero. And the only hospital there is in pretty bad shape.
It sounds like a system that's struggling to meet basic needs.
Absolutely. And then you have the perspective of those in charge, the mayor of Melgaço, Tica Viegas. He acknowledges that healthcare needs work,
Okay.
but he also defends his family's political record. Says Melgaço has improved a lot.
It's always more complicated than it seems.
Right.
Right. And it's interesting to hear how he responds to the criticisms from residents.
Like what kind of criticisms?
Like, he says he'll look into the school meal situation,
Okay.
and he attributes those high dropout rates to, get this, early marriages.
Early marriages, that's a different perspective.
It makes you think about how these issues get tackled or not, and the complexities of governing a place like Melgaço.
Definitely. It seems like there are many factors at play here.
Absolutely. And it's not just about what's happening internally in Melgaço. We have to zoom out and look at the bigger picture.
The wider economic landscape.
Exactly. And how that plays into the disparity between places like Melgaço and São Caetano do Sul.
And that brings us to the federal pact, right?
Right. The federal pact is a big part of this story.
And it's about how resources get distributed across Brazil.
And it seems like it hasn't been all that effective in bridging the gap between the haves and the have-nots.
So we're seeing how these local challenges are tied to bigger systemic issues.
It's like a puzzle with all these interconnected pieces, and understanding those connections is key to figuring out potential solutions.
That makes sense. It's rarely a simple fix.
Exactly, and that's what makes this deep dive so fascinating. We're just scratching the surface here.
Well, let's keep digging then. I'm ready for more.
All right, let's delve deeper into São Caetano do Sul, the municipality with that impressive HDI score, see what's going on there.
Sounds good to me. Let's do it.
All right, now picture this. A place where public services are not just adequate, they're top-notch.
Okay, I'm listening.
Imagine well-funded after-school programs,
Huh?
cutting-edge health facilities, free public transportation.
Wow, it sounds like a utopia compared to Melgaço.
Right, and they've got this fully functional sewage system, something that's, well, non-existent in Melgaço.
It's amazing how different things can be within the same country.
The article describes this incredible public school, the Santa Maria Educational Complex.
Okay, what's so special about it?
They've got gardens, tons of natural light, even their own vegetable garden.
Wow, sounds like a dream school.
And get this, sugar is banned for the youngest students.
Really? They're serious about healthy eating.
Oh yeah, they're way ahead of the curve.
I'm impressed.
And then there's the healthcare. It's another level.
Okay, tell me more.
Residents have access to this brand new facility. They can see specialists, get their meds, even have physiotherapy.
All in one place.
Yep, all under one roof. And they even have a multi-million-dollar MRI machine.
That's incredible, the kind of care many can only dream of.
It's a world apart from Melgaço's struggling hospital.
It really highlights those disparities.
The article even introduces us to a couple of senior citizens, Jose Batista Leal Filho, he's 82, and Pedro Pioli, 84.
Right.
They're both thriving in São Caetano do Sul, staying active in the city's senior sports programs.
So they're living proof of the benefits of good public services.
Exactly. They're like poster children for a high HDI.
But wait, there's more to the story, right? You mentioned something about a twist.
Oh, there's always a twist, even in a place with such a stellar HDI score.
Okay, lay it on me.
It turns out that score doesn't tell the whole story.
What do you mean?
Well, the article highlights research by this architect, Ana Paula Borges.
Okay.
She found that because property prices have gone through the roof, a lot of lower-income residents have been pushed out.
So it's creating these pockets of wealth within the city.
Yeah, exactly. The article calls them islands of wealth.
So even in a place with a high HDI, you still have inequality.
It's a good reminder that things aren't always what they seem.
And what about the favela, Vila Cristália? I remember you mentioning that.
Ah, Vila Cristália, that's the perfect example.
How so?
It's this community right next to São Caetano do Sul.
Okay.
And many people who live there actually work in São Caetano do Sul.
But they can't access the city services.
Exactly. They face all these barriers even though they're contributing to the city's economy.
That's a tough situation, a hidden layer of inequality.
It's like the HDI score is just one piece of the puzzle.
It's like looking at a postcard and thinking, the whole story.
Exactly. There's always more going on beneath the surface.
So even São Caetano do Sul has its own complexities.
Oh, absolutely. And to add another layer, there's even political drama.
Oh, no. What happened?
The mayor of São Caetano do Sul, get this, had his mandate revoked.
Revoked?
Yep, because of illicit fundraising.
Wow, talk about a plot twist.
It seems like there's always more to uncover.
Definitely. We're getting a much clearer picture now.
It's not just a simple black and white comparison between two places.
They both have their own internal dynamics, and that HDI score, while useful, isn't the be-all and end-all.
Right, it's just one data point in a much bigger story.
So where do we go from here?
Well, I think it's time to circle back to Melgaço.
Back to Melgaço.
Yeah, remember, it might be at the bottom of that HDI ranking, but there's this other crucial factor,
What's that?
the Amazon rainforest.
Right, they're right in the heart of it.
The article points out that over 90% of Melgaço's territory is covered by native vegetation.
Wow, that's a lot.
It's one of the most well-preserved areas in the entire state of Pará.
It's like this incredible natural treasure hidden in plain sight.
Exactly, and it makes you wonder about the possibilities, right?
Possibilities.
Like, could this be a key to a better future for Melgaço?
I'm not sure. How so?
Well, we've got this incredible natural resource right there.
The rainforest.
Yeah, and there's this growing global demand for things like acai.
Acai, that purple superfood.
That's the one, and Pará dominates the acai market.
Really? I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, they're a major player, and that means potential economic growth for places like Melgaço.
I see where you're going with this.
The article even suggests setting up processing plants within the region.
Instead of just exporting the raw acai.
Exactly. It could create jobs, boost the local economy, and maybe even give those communities more control over the acai industry.
It's like cutting out the middleman and empowering the local people.
Precisely. It's a fascinating idea.
And it ties back to that economist we mentioned earlier, Jonathan Goulart Costa, right?
You got it. He's the one who argues that Brazil needs to rethink that federal pact.
Right. The system that decides how resources are divided.
And he suggests that municipalities that are dedicated to protecting the Amazon, like Melgaço, should actually be compensated for their efforts.
Interesting. So it's not just about giving them money, it's about recognizing the value they bring.
Exactly. It's about incentivizing environmental conservation.
It's like saying, hey, you're doing something good for the planet. Let's make sure you benefit from it.
It's a pretty radical idea, but it makes you think, right?
Definitely. It raises a lot of questions about how we value things, both economically and environmentally.
And how we can create systems that benefit both people and the planet.
That's the ultimate goal, isn't it?
It is, and it's a goal that requires us to think outside the box, to challenge the status quo, and to consider all the angles.
To look beyond the surface and see the interconnectedness of everything.
Exactly, and that's what we're trying to do here on the Deep Dive.
Well, you're doing a great job so far. I'm
Yes.
hooked.
Thanks, I'm glad to hear it. But we're not done yet. There's one more piece to this puzzle we need to explore.
Okay, what's that?
The federal pact itself. We need to unpack that a bit more to understand why it struggled to address these inequalities.
You're right. We've talked about it a lot, but we haven't really dug into the details.
So let's do that. Let's break it down and see what's really going on.
Sounds good to me. Let's get into it.
All right, think of the federal pact as this set of rules that determines how money flows from the top, the federal government, down to the states and municipalities.
Okay, so it's about how resources are shared across the country.
Exactly, and the idea is to make things a bit fairer, to make sure that regions that have less aren't left behind.
So in theory, it should help prevent situations like Melgaço's.
Right, where a lack of funding leads to inadequate everything, healthcare, education, infrastructure, the whole 9 yards.
But the article suggests it hasn't been very successful.
Unfortunately, no, not really.
Why is that? It seems like a good idea in principle.
Well, critics argue that the current system doesn't allocate enough resources to the poorer regions, like Melgaço.
So the money isn't going where it's needed most.
And there are also concerns about bureaucracy, corruption, lack of transparency, all those things that can hinder the flow of resources.
So even if the intentions are good, the execution might be flawed.
Exactly. It's a complex system with a lot of moving parts.
And this is where Costa's argument about rethinking the federal pact comes in.
Right. He's not just pointing out the problems, he's offering solutions.
So what does he propose?
Well, one thing he suggests is giving municipalities more flexibility in how they spend their allocated funds.
Instead of having strict rules dictated from the top.
Exactly. The idea is that local governments might be better equipped to know what their communities need most.
That makes sense. They're closer to the ground.
He also floats the idea of merging smaller municipalities.
To streamline things.
Yeah, to reduce those administrative costs and potentially free up more money for essential services.
It's about finding efficiencies within the system.
And of course, there's his proposal to directly compensate those municipalities that protect the Amazon.
Like Melgaço.
Exactly, recognizing their contribution to the environment.
It's a pretty radical idea, but it could be a game changer.
It's about thinking differently, about finding creative solutions to these deeply rooted problems.
And about acknowledging the interconnectedness of it all, how economic development, environmental protection, and social justice are all intertwined.
It's not just about fixing one thing, it's about creating a system that works for everyone.
A system that's equitable, sustainable, and just.
That's the dream, and it's a dream worth fighting for.
I agree, and I think this deep dive has given us some valuable insights into how we can start to move towards that dream.
It's all about raising awareness, sparking conversations, and challenging ourselves to do better.
And maybe, just maybe, Melgaço can become a beacon of hope, a model for how we can create a more just and sustainable world.
That's a beautiful thought, and it's one that I hope stays with us long after this deep dive is over.
Me too. It's a reminder that even in the face of adversity, there's always hope for a better future.
And that hope is what drives us to keep exploring, to keep questioning, and to keep striving for a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive.
Well said. I couldn't agree more.